Hello, everyone. We're going to start the session now. So if you're there, give us a wave, let us know that you're there. You will be recorded, so if you really don't want to appear, then we understand, but we would love to see you if that's possible. Laurie's waving, that's great. Rory, nice to see you. Delighted to have you all here. Thank you very much for joining in. I'm going to ask everyone to just stay on mute unless you are speaking, at which point I will make sure that everybody can do that. So I'm working across a couple of screens, so excuse me if I look away. I'm looking at our agenda and what it is that we need to get through today. We will do a space where you will all be able to introduce yourselves, and in that I'd like you to say who you are, what area of art you're working in, what you're hoping to gain from the network, and then I'd like you to pass on to a person who hasn't spoken yet. So I hope that that's okay with everyone. Other things that we're going to do today are think about amendments and queries to the white paper that we've got, think about our next steps, think about our next meetings, and then a couple of other notices if anybody wants to share anything further then. Is that okay with everyone? Can I see a thumbs up from you, please? Fantastic. So I'm going to invite everybody to be able to unmute themselves, but if you wouldn't mind not doing that just yet, I'd appreciate that. I just want to make sure that when it comes to it, you will be able to speak. So I'll go first. My name's Emma. I'm the director of the Liverpool Irish Festival. From the networking, I'm hoping to meet artists. I'm hoping to meet other cultural organisations. I'd like to work more collaboratively and do better wayfinding across our network to help support Irish arts in England, Britain more widely. And I would like to pass to William Foote, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is William Foote. I am the centre manager for the Irish Cultural Centre in Hammersmith. I'm joining the meeting, sort of a little bit of a repeat of what Emma said there. We're looking to collaborate with more artists, showcase the best of Irish talent as much as we can in England, the UK, and the world. Since COVID started, we have an online digital channel, and of course, with COVID ongoing, so many things keep getting thrown out of the pram and pushed into different times. So it's just having a list of more collaboration, more what we can do, and more that we can showcase. Yes, so I guess I'll just pass it to the person who's next beside me, which is Jean Maskell.
Hello, I'm Jean Maskell. I'm an independent artist, writer and ceramicist. And I do most of my work between Liverpool and Wexford, where my family is. I'm normally in Wexford 6 or 7 times a year. I'm interested in better links really between Liverpool and Wexford in particular, and helping to facilitate that in any way that I can with artists in Liverpool and Wexford.
Who would you pass to, Jean?
I pass to Patrick Morrison.
Okay, thank you, Jean. Hello, everyone. My name is Patrick Morrison. So I am currently chair of Irish in Britain, but also I work for Cultus Culturarian. So my day and my world predominantly revolves around traditional arts, traditional music. I've been involved in this since the festival really, and working with Emma. And I'd be interested to know how what we do in Cultus in terms of traditional music and language and a bit of dancing and storytelling actually ties in and works kind of hand in hand with other art forms, whether they be kind of what you think is traditional art forms, or whether they be something which you think is more relative to a contemporary island. I guess I'll put it that way. And I'm going to pass to Jerry.
Hi, Patrick. Thank you. Yeah, Jerry Malumbi here in Derbyshire. I've been involved with Triskelion Theatre over 30 years, producing plays and concerts throughout the UK. But I'll again steal Emma's introduction. I mean, the power of networking. The more we can network and work together and share ideas, share artists, whatever. Just one thing we may get a chance to discuss later was around older people and reminiscence. I know Patrick and Cultus and Irish in Britain have something up and running around that. Maybe that's something, as we're all artists of some kind, we could incorporate into the work plan if that's what you wanted to do. Oh, sorry, I'll hand over to Rory.
Thanks, Jerry. So I'm Rory Cullen, and I'm the Policy and Public Affairs Officer with Irish in Britain. I mean, I personally don't particularly work in the arts and culture area, but Irish in Britain, we're very, very keen on supporting networks like absolutely fantastic. And it's great to be here today. So that's what we kind of hope to gain, is to support your work, help facilitate networks, and hopefully link in some of the outcomes from this with the parliamentary group that we work with quite closely, which is currently coming up with a bit of a calendar for the year ahead. Yeah, so thanks for having me today, and I'll pass on to John Chandler.
That's me. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. Unfortunately, I can't be here for all that long. I've got an appointment which I must get to in about half an hour or so. But I'm the founder and chair of the Liverpool Irish Festival. I say that with some deference to my chum Terry Clark-Coyne, who's also here this afternoon, who had some early events which the idea of which I plundered. His were mainly exclusively focused on music. Our festival, of course, encompasses much more than that, virtually everything under the sun, probably far too much, but that we can deliver so much as a tribute to my director Emma, who's here today alongside us. And I would echo what's been said essentially by Emma and Patrick, former board member as well as Terry. So we're overrepresented here, I'm afraid to say, but I'm sure we'll be democratic about it and strive to be so. But in terms of developing that connectedness that's been alluded to, and raising profile and awareness and engendering some combination of support to increase the prominence of Irish originated arts, culture, history, heritage. I think that's what I'm looking to this organisation to assist us in delivering. And I don't know, who is it? Jennifer, who's below me on the screen? Maybe it's your turn to take over.
Thank you so much, John. Hi, my name's Jennifer. I'm Cultural Heritage and Sports Project Officer at Birmingham Irish Association. So hi. So essentially my role at the association is to connect as many artists with the community as possible. So when I heard the email and everything about this going on today, I was really excited because I thought, you know, it's joining in with all the support network and hopefully contributing something of value to this too. So that's why I'm here, really. If I could pass on to Laurie, if I pass on to Laurie, is that okay?
Thanks, Jennifer. My name is Laurie Wiseman. I am American. I'm working on my Irish citizenship. I've been living here and traveling back and forth for about 30 years now. I've been here now 10 years raising 2 children. I'm interested in understanding relationships between how this all kind of works in Europe compared to the States, where it would be more commerce centered, where here it's a lot of relationship centered and organizations. And I guess I'm trying to learn as I've tried to keep up with my practice, but I haven't been out showing my work much, mostly working as a mom. I don't know who to pass on to. Rose, how about you?
Thanks, Laura. I'm a trustee at the Irish World Heritage Centre, Manchester, on the charity, the Irish Diaspora Foundation. And I'm also chair of the Manchester Irish Writers. I'm being a retired art teacher and a published writer myself, taking interest in all the cultural events at the centre. And we have had some experience of collaboration with the Liverpool Irish Festival in the past, like some of the writers went down to read on one occasion. And we hosted one of their, on another occasion at the Irish World Heritage Centre. So I just want to continue that, especially in these times, maybe get involved in more of these Zoom events as well, because it seems to be the experience of the past year for those of us shielding and for the elderly. And we have some archives of reminiscence at the Irish World Heritage Centre that maybe Jerry mentioned that could dip into, or maybe use in some way. I'll pass over to is it John McCafferty?
Okay then, I'm an outsider. I stay in Glasgow. My Irish connections go back 3 generations when my family came from County Antrim over to Glasgow in 1840. So I know there's a lot of similarity between Glasgow and Liverpool. Very similar. So I say, and I'm also interested in the theatre, the Citizen Theatre here in Glasgow, and my son lives in Dublin, so I go over there and go to the Abbey quite a lot as well. Thank you.
John, John, are you working within the arts and culture particularly, or is it just a hobby?
Just more of a hobby, yes, more of a hobby, yeah. And I'm now connected with not connected, but I'm the Celtic Connections are on just now. So I'm watching the programmes every night. So I'm enjoy that, the Irish and the Scottish music,
And I think, although if I've got this wrong, please put your hand up. I think we've got to go to Terry last, but by no means least. And then have we seen everyone? Has anybody been, if you've not been spoken to, please lift your hand. No, okay, so Terry and then back to me.
Hi everyone, Terry Clark Coyne, sorry about the mad name, probably when no one chose me. I'm principally a trad musician, but very involved and passionate about all sides of Irish culture, particularly the heading cultural connectedness. I really think that this type of collaboration of all of the factions through the Irish communities is a new and a best step forward. As someone who lives in the hills of North Wales, living and playing in isolation, it really is about how we all use and work with each other for the future. I think the new exchanges over internet have really stunted some things, but are actually making some things happen and some things grow. So I'm actually now keen to actually investigate connectedness through the online situations and different programs and ways of collaborating, because it's going to be quite some time before large scale projects and collaborations can come face to face. So just a sort of interim stage I'm pretty keen to be involved in as well. So, but it's great to meet everyone. Thanks.
Thanks ever so much for that. I should also add that we have had formal apologies from a number of people who aren't here today, and just to help even out some of that bias of people who have had or are connected with the Liverpool Irish Festival, we've got Rachel Ingersoll and also Kelly O'Connor, who is the new cultural lead at the Department for Foreign Affairs. They would both have liked to be here today, but sadly a filming commitment came up for them, so they've had to go and do that. But ordinarily they would now like to join this and would be involved. Similarly, Julie McNamara, who was at the very first session, has sent apologies due to illness. Adam McGuigan from Wake the Beast would have loved to be here, but has a filming opportunity that's arisen and couldn't miss out on it. And also Gary Dunn from the London Irish Centre. So there is a wider group around this, not to mention the rest of the members who just may not have been able to make it and haven't sent apologies. So this is, although it's a small cohort today, it's quite mobile, and it's got some great people in it who can help commission artists, who work with artists, and who actually represent the cultural sector here pretty well. So I'm thrilled with who we have got here. I'm glad that there are other people who would like to be involved too. And I think we've got a really nice working group to start today's proceedings with. So the first thing really for us to touch base with was the white paper that was circulated, and it was also linked in with the event link if you didn't receive it by email. And I just wondered if there were any major points around that. I'll take grammar points out of the meeting, if that's okay. I've spotted a number, but if there are any major sort of content points that anybody would like to pick up on, or comments they'd like to make about its direction, I'd really like to hear those. Can I throw that back out to you? Do we think it's going in the right direction? A hands up for if we think it's going in the right way. Nods, a few hands, a puzzled face from Laurie. So we think it's going in the right direction. Do we think the questions that we've asked IIB to take to the All Parliamentary Group are the right questions? And do we think that the research things that we've asked that they might explore are the right exploration points? Rory, do you want to come in on that and say how that looks practically from your point of view?
Yeah, sure, Emma. Yeah, I think the document is looking very promising, very interesting. In terms of the questions for the APPG, I think it's a great start. I just think perhaps it's trying to bite off a little bit more than it can chew, with kind of 6 rather perhaps long questions. And there's, I think the first one, like Irishness, Northern Irish, understood and reflected by its national agencies, that's the sort of thing. Bringing, trying to use the APPG to kind of leverage organisations like Arts Council England. That's exactly what we want to be using it for. I was just one or two that I wasn't sure if they need to be in the APPG group, such as the second one, like why aren't Irish and Northern Irish artists and organisations using and celebrating their national identity more? I suppose that it's qualified by what are the barriers, but that kind of feels a bit more addressed to artists, perhaps, or organisations. I mean, I'm happy to be, I'm happy for you to respond to that. That's just my kind of immediate thought. I'm just looking at them now, hence my kind of slightly slow response. Yeah, I mean, when I was looking at them earlier, that was just one or two of those I was kind of thinking, is this really for the APPG or more a kind of something for the kind of sector to ask itself?
Yeah. I think that's right. And I think that the second one is in there because it's about barriers and about that advocacy that we as cultural organisations, rather than necessarily as independent artists, might want to help independent artists start claiming and using more often. And there had been some conversation, I think in the last session, but it may have been in follow-up feedback, that said, well, we don't use our Irishness because it hasn't helped, or actually we found that to be a barrier. And so our advocacy around that, I think, needs to step up or shift in some way to help artists understand whether it's a usable commodity almost. Like, can we capitalize on that? Is it worth doing, or is it providing problems?
Yeah, no, that's a bit clearer.
I think that's how it's landed there, but it might need rescoping. I wonder whether the thing for us to do with this, Rory, is shave those questions into a way that IIB would ask them, and then
they're just not really written as in how we would ask them, I think, is my issue. Like the fourth one. The fourth one is, how do we use Brexit to galvanise connections? I mean, that's sort of asking the sector itself. So I think they just need to kind of have a bit of a reshape, of reframing of those. But I think they're all relevant stuff and exactly the questions we should be asking. I mean, the final one is perhaps, I was wondering if that's on the scope of the cultural connectedness. Hate crimes are aggregated by offence. I'm not going to read it out, but that just sort of feels slightly beyond the scope of this. I don't know if that's.
You're probably right. It's something that's come through our festival on a couple of occasions, in terms of why people are trying to build up tolerance through cultural connectedness, why they're using arts and culture to try and share their experience. And so that's how it has come into our radar. Perhaps it doesn't fit the scope of your questioning, but I think also the reason that sometimes, so for instance, let me rephrase that, sorry, I've taken myself down a bad path. An issue that we have got is understanding whether or not there is a conflation of white Irish and white Britishness, because hate crime isn't split into white crimes and therefore understood in the context of white Irish, white British, white others, of which there are many other categories, but I'm not listing now. Actually, it's very difficult to say whether or not Irish in Britain are facing hate crime. And yet an awful lot of the arts and culture work that we're doing is about cultural tolerance, understanding, recognition, awareness raising. So there is a crossover in our work and why we do it, but the fact that those can't be justified statistically, we can't make those cases and arguments appropriately because we don't have the data. So that's how it's come into this document. Whether or not we think it is a question for something else, I think is for us to answer here. I'm not tied to it specifically, but that is how it came in. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a lot to chew on, I think, for some of these questions, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
No. But it's not a quick win.
No.
By any means.
No, I mean, it's, some of these are really, really big issues that affect the whole Irish community, not just the kind of arts and cultural sector. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't take them on. Anyway, so my kind of main takeaway is perhaps just try and kind of pinpoint a bit more some of these questions, what it is we're really asking for. And I'm wondering if 6 is perhaps too much. But I mean, there's lots to talk about and lots that makes you think about. So I think it's a great start. Anyway, let's pass on to somebody else. So
just so that we don't lose an action from there, I'm taking it that the action is that you /IIB are going to look at those 6 questions and work out which are the most likely you can take forward and how, so that we will understand what the questions raised there have been or will be.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps Emma, we could have a talk about it outside of this. Sure. That might be useful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any other comments on the paper as a whole and sort of the suggestions for next steps for the network?
Emma, can I just say something there as well? I mean, I'm trying to avoid using the word omission, but I was thinking, and I know I'm new into the forum, but the students at Irish people studying here, or Irish students, whatever, as they define themselves, who might be studying the arts, performing arts, whether we could some way incorporate them and Irish studies into the forum. For example, I know last year there was about 10 students at Keele University who happened to do, who had a commonality with Irish dancing, and they hosted a fesh. I covered it for the Irish Post, but they were all either people born in England or students over from Ireland who just wanted to put on a fesh. So they met their own need. So I think it's a great resource maybe to the 4 or 5 years that the Irish-born students are here to get involved maybe with Irish culture, Irish studies. Is that making sense?
Yeah, of course. And I think there is an issue with this document in that it is very early days. This is only meeting 2, and this paper has been created between those 2 points. So we've found an awful lot. As we've started creating the work, there are certain limitations that come out of it. So for instance, initially it was like, this would be a great British connectedness session. That's not how funding works. And actually the population bases in the 4 different nations are so different that the experiences are different. So then we had to think, well, structurally then, do we need to bring this down a little bit? Do we need to refocus this? So students at the moment are aggregated within Irish people in Britain. And we haven't done any sort of splitting out of audiences at all. I don't think. And I think as the network develops and we develop probably task groups working in certain areas, that things like studentship and seniors and how we try and integrate those and how we look at the relevance of our work to those different sections. So who is best to help flag wave for each other to reach the right audiences will become more apparent, but we're just not there yet. We're not there yet.
I understand that there's an open invitation for people to join. I probably just maybe dreamed too much, but I'm sure the students, if they wanted, they can join in.
No, I think there's space and scope in the document for us to start outlining who the Irish in Britain are and what groups make up that wider collective here. But in general, what I'm sensing is the paper's okay. Actually, the connection and the collaboration between us now is really where this group needs to go, and that there is some work with IIB to be done to start thinking about how we want to advocate more often and possibly with better quality nationally. Does that feel right?
Yeah.
So maybe the development of the paper is sort of done, and that becomes where we sort of go back to reconsider things or share with other cultural organisations that want to come on board and see what we're doing. We're recognising that there is a national underrepresentation of Irish creativity here, and that between us all, we probably need to do a bit more advocacy to say, no, this is a serious part of our population that needs representing, that has a distinct and discrete set of experiences, needs, wants, focus that need to be addressed in arts provision in England. And that's what then we work on as a group and IIB start talking about with national agencies. Is that right? Does that feel like the right direction? So in that, then, next cultural connectedness sessions should really about artists being able to talk about their work and commissioners talking about what they need, so that we can start doing some pathfinding between artists and organisations. Again, do we feel like that's going in the right direction? So there's nods all round. Great. Does anybody want to talk about what work they have now and that they would like to share with us then? I can kick off if not. So for instance, I will come to you in one moment, Terry, as the hand went up. I'll just let you know that we worked on exchange as a theme last year, but of course we only really got to develop about half a festival in terms of the scope and scale that we would ordinarily work on. And while we would ordinarily move the theme annually, actually at board level we had a discussion about it to say there's still so much we can explore here and that we can use to take the story from this year into next year and help explore things further, pull strands out more, tell more artist stories, and work physically, we hope, with artists that we couldn't do that with this year, so that we don't lose those connections, we can explore those exchanges more richly. So that's kind of the direction that we're taking this year. If any of the artists that are here think, I've got work on exchange that would be really good, I would love for you to contact me with project ideas so that we can start thinking about how that's funded, what we can do, and how we explore that further with you. So that's me. Terry, I'm going to pass to you now.
Thanks a lot. I'll make up something to say now because I was waving goodbye to John, not waving to have attention. But
sorry.
But that is completely fine. Yeah, a couple of points really. One coming from the paper just as I was skimming through it as you were talking again, and I'm currently in the middle of a text actually, or a message to a radio station who've asked about musicians contacting them to talk about projects and music going on in the northwest, and particularly in the Wales area where I am. And I realised that as I was texting this, halfway through it, and obviously I joined the meeting, I came across an age-old niggle in the back of my brain, almost an embarrassment for introducing myself to being an Irish musician. And I've come across this so many numerous times, particularly across the British side of music, where the Irish side of it, people's psyche from outside of the Irish diaspora tends to slot you into the pigeonholes of, oh, it's Riverdance, oh, it's Paddy Irish band in a pub, oh, it's it's a difficult thing to overcome sometimes when you're introducing yourself cold to a new person, and it shouldn't be there, but there's right in the back of the brain is, how do you think, oh, this Paddy fella, oh, this Irish stuff, and we're so prevalent in the communities, and an amount of front of house type music that is all around the country, in every genre and arts in particular, that it shouldn't be there. So this white paper, sort of, from my point, it starts to address a wider issue of acceptance and discrimination, which is, goes back, I've been brought up in an Irish community, as most of you know, from childhood, and my dad through childhood, and it was very natural within that community, but outside of it, I've always felt a bit of a stranger in my own land, and unfortunately, sometimes made to feel a stranger in Ireland as well, for being another nationality bringing it to Ireland. So there's those things to overcome. Sorry about that. That was an aside thing that just come to me as I was reading. The other thing really is, I've found that connecting, there's one there about Brexit and also about Europe. I've worked across Europe for the whole of me, since I was 14 in groups. Throughout my life, I've travelled Europe and further. And I've never had to apologise, and I've always actually been sought after or, revered. You're playing the Irish stuff, you're playing the folk stuff, and it really is sought after and given the same status across most of, we'll talk Europe, most European countries I've been to, which is most of the 27. I've never ever felt that I'm bringing this Irish or Paddy music or whatever people sometimes associate it to, but in Britain they do. Now that so to have a project to bring forward, and I have many ideas, most of them say shelved because of that particular situation, but nowhere to take it, but it would be treated with the brevity, levity, and equality that I'd be looking for. So I leave them behind, and often now do stuff on my own.
Can I drill into that a little bit? You said
Yeah.
that you felt that in Britain, all over Britain, or England specifically?
England specifically, because obviously I've got Celticness in Wales, where I feel very happy. Although, you know, I don't have a place, but there are lots of Irish musicians in Wales. They're trying to grow a Welsh cultural music, and I haven't delved into that because it's not quite at the stage where I want to join in with it at the level but it doesn't mean I don't, and I want to support it. I go to festivals. Lots of my local friends are all Welsh musicians, and they're great people, great musicians, and you know, it never feels strange apart from when I'm applying for things in England, and it used to with the Irish Festival, you know, as many of the, you know, the Cultural Centre and, you know, Birmingham, London, Manchester, you know, you'll have come across all of this, I'm sure, over the years, particularly those of us of an older generation who've had to sort of struggle to put things together and bring it into the mainstream even of our local communities and have it accepted. And sometimes your last statement about, you know, the sort of hate campaigns and whatever, you know, there's been vitriol, there's been negativity, there's been real barriers to overcome. So that, you know, this is the great step forward for me. But what the actual meat on the bones, how do we put some projects together, some collaborations together, that really means something and can be the evidence block for the Irish in Britain, whatever, to take forward and say, this type of thing can happen when you give it the place to flourish. Yeah.
I completely agree, and we have to, the festival has to recognise that as a festival we only sort of pop up really once a year and on a couple of celebration days, despite the fact our work is year round. But it means that we're only a highlight point in that work, which is great, and it isn't a nothing, it's definitely a something. We're trying to make sure that we're doing other work now that addresses Irish influence and looks at the positivity of that, to start breaking down how that's something that you can just pick on or eradicate. Because, I mean, particularly here, it's so entrenched in the very fabric of the city. You know, the curbstones at the docks are made of granite from Newry. The hands that built the docks were predominantly, or had an awful lot of Irish and Northern Irish helpers. So, you know, it's literally part of the fabric, and we're hoping that by trying to remind people of that on the day-to-day basis, as well as the high point of the festival, that suddenly that becomes something that you can't just dismiss, and that we start unpicking some of those overt, bizarre assumptions that have just become embedded and entrenched, like paddy music, or, you know, jokes about an Irishman, a Scotsman, and because they're never good, they're not helpful, but they sort of perpetuate these like microaggression level nationalisms and poor thought, lazy thought. So we're sort of trying to address those by doing positive work and reinforcing positivity all the way through, and are trying to create as many opportunities where we can do that using Irish artists or using Irish diaspora artists, and Liverpool-born Irish people's work is all part of that, celebrating how that works. So we're really keen to meet and work with new artists as well, and think about how we bring those things together to dovetail those messages that actually this is an incredible creative melting pot that brings ever such a lot to not just the Irish of the city, but everyone can share in that and learn from it, learn about it. So I think there's so much that we can do as a collective to really help those stories along. We may not even talk about the hate crime aspects of it or the negative tranches of that. It's all positive reinforcement by having it there at all. But that's why it needs funding, that's why it needs advocacy and representation, and why we need to make sure that we are being given the opportunity to share the opportunity. I think that's where we're trying to go. It feels as though other groups in here are doing the same. I'm getting positive nods from Jennifer and Wyn. And so Wyn, we didn't see you at the beginning of the session. Wyn works with Irish Community Care in Liverpool and across the Northwest. Wyn, I wonder if you would like to say anything.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hi, everybody.
Sorry.
I'm really sorry. Yes, I've been desperately trying to get in and pressing all kinds of things, and then realised that there was actually a Zoom code. So apologies, it took me half an hour nearly to work that one out. So I'm just an idiot. I'd come off another meeting, so I was like trying to rush to get in. I really welcome the white paper. I think it's beyond time that we were doing this work. So thank you to Irish and Britain. I think that's really important to say. Thank you for the festival to, for allowing this space, because I think these conversations, that stuff that you've been talking about, Terry, right there is so many of our community's experiences. Dara O'Brien says we're all right to be Irish when we're in our place, and I think that's the kind of scenario that we experience still in a lot of the different areas where we dare to step out of our place. And I think one of the places that we have a transitional space that we can have conversations that are non-threatening is around arts and music, because in some sense, actually, Terry, simply because people see us as the fiddle-dee-dee, the Irish music. Oh, that's what, it's great, we'll go along and Irish Fest will be full of music. It is, but if we use that as a starting point to have really interesting and challenging conversations in really safe and open places, I would go further actually, because one of the things that I find as a community worker is that, and I wanted to bring this up, so I think it contextually fits here, is the fact that we've got a lot of kind of, there's cultists, there's the Irish dancing groups, there's some really great formal cultural spaces where we can be. We work with people who still don't even feel comfortable being in there sometimes, and don't have the same opportunities to be in there, in those spaces, having your mummy pay regular fees for your dancing classes is beyond a lot of our service users. But at the same time, what they need is spaces and places where they can still express their culture. And I think we've got a lot of people who lose out and miss out because they don't have those spaces outside of the formalised structures of those groups. And I applaud the festival for being increasingly one of those spaces that allows voices that sit outside that kind of mainstream Irishness, if you like, for opening up. Look at the conversations we had last year, the year before last, about, Chinese Irish, Black Irish, all of those kind of conversations, and those spaces where we found affinity, where we found partnership, where we found like-mindedness and likeness of experiences. And I think that's really important going forward for Liverpool and for the Northwest. Actually, I think there's similarity of experiences in Manchester too. I just applaud the fact that this is happening and we're having these conversations, because I really do think that that's vital for our communities and for us to be drawing the community into these conversations and these spaces over the next couple of, kind of months in the development of projects. So I would ask you, if you are writing stuff and you are thinking of stuff, think beyond the boundaries. We have access. We've done some of the most amazing photography work with our Traveller Women, which was internationally recognised as part of the festival 3 years ago. So they're the kind of things that the festival's doing, and it's opening up those dialogues and conversations. And I think you're right, how do we keep it going for the rest of the year? That's the question really, isn't it, for all of us? And how do we sustain the energy and the drivers that are pushing the festival's boundaries? How do we keep pushing those for the rest of the year as a across the whole lot of us?
And it's that Traveller project in some ways that spurs me on for this sort of cultural connectedness, because what that needs is multi-year support, yes, not project support. We haven't been able to get back and work with that community properly since that event, which I'm gutted about, because we just haven't had the project funds to keep doing it, and you can't just keep reintroducing yourself. So when I hope I'm still working on that in the back of my head, that we still need to do more with that and grow that project and do something that spans years. And in these sorts of things and in those hopes and aspirations is kind of where I hope the Cultural Connectedness Exchange helps us build bigger, better projects for longer. So thank you ever so much for bringing that up. The dual heritage work that Wynne mentioned there is also a feeder for this, and part of that stuff around hate crime that we were talking about, that Irish and Black, if you look at Black Irish, it's all about white people. So where are Black people in that? So we've had big conversations around that. Our Chinese Irish community in Liverpool have removed themselves from society in COVID, and had an awful lot of hate crime faced at them, which means that our Chinese Irish community members have also removed themselves and withdrawn. So we're trying really hard to work with them, but with reduced capacity, people not recognising that resources are needed in those areas. And we need artists to work in those areas with cultural specificity and the right touch to make those things important, resonant and meaningful. So hopefully those sorts of conversations and shared experiences across the country here might help with that, and understanding, getting a barometer for what those communities are facing across the country, because the Liverpool experience may not be the London experience, may not be the Birmingham experience either. And certainly for our friends who are in Ireland, that may not be the issue there either. So sort of trying to think through some of those things here feels important. So they're all areas of work that we are working on. If as an independent artist in this group, you have ideas around that, I'm open to that. I suspect others here are too. Jennifer, do you want to say anything about Birmingham's Irish Centre and points of work and crossover that are happening here?
Oh, thanks, Emma. I mean, at the moment, it's quite a small, this is kind of really, well, it's really insightful for me because I mean, obviously at the moment with the pandemic, everything's been put online, but it's because I'm fairly new to the role here. We're quite a small cultural department here, but it's finding these issues to target in specific ways that are targeted, and not trying to do it as a generalized approach and then having to redo that again, like you say, sort of revisiting that again. So it is really insightful. I mean, yeah, it's, I think, but what we do, obviously, it's we're trying to, during the pandemic, trying to build a lot of relationships with these artists. Like there was one, for example, I met yesterday, who was he's an author who was releasing his book in February. It's called Under the Bridge by Jack Byrne. Really, really lovely man. But he's trying to get, we had a conversation and an interview on Zoom yesterday about similar topics to what we're discussing today, and how it's developed over time and evolved, the sort of situations that artists are facing, but it's still an ongoing thing. So it needs to have constant work with getting things out there, promoting and sort of combating that force that they're feeling at the moment. I mean, similar things to that is what we're doing at the moment, but obviously we'd like to, which is great that we're on here as well and sort of connecting, because then sharing ideas and working on like bigger and better projects for us all and everything. So sorry, I'm rambling.
That's okay. These early sessions, I think, have to have and allow for a little bit of this free form and us finding our feet and finding out where these things dovetail, and we've got things that we can bring to each other to collaborate over it. So I think it might be a bit woolly at the minute, but I think we've kind of got to get through some of that so that we can start actually fostering and forging these connections.
Yes.
I hope people agree and can sort of manage to get through a few sessions before we start sort of doing it. But so, for instance, we've got a working roster of around 100 artists that we speak to annually. So if you were putting on a festival and we were putting on a festival, there's 100 people already there where we can make connections. And just by knowing about one another, knowing each other's faces, being able to pick up the phone or drop an email over going, do you know somebody who works in Dual Heritage Lives in Wexford? We can go, yeah, or not in Wexford, but it, you know, that we can have that relationship, I think is is going to start being ever more important for us.
Absolutely. And meeting the needs as sort of as a diaspora in whole.
Well, and hearing from artists here about what they're facing at the coalface of creativity in England or in Ireland, and figuring out how we work through that.
Yes.
What's interesting to them, or what's a hardship for them, so that we as organisers, commissioners, or collaborators can figure out ways to plug gaps and help bring people up.
And meet the needs of that makes sense. That makes sense.
Jean, I'd love to pass to you.
Yeah, it's just something that just come to mind. I was thinking about this morning, which was about Liverpool Biennial, which is, it's a huge worldwide event of people coming from all over the world to do arts. And I was wondering how many, I find it quite difficult as a local person to access the Biennial, and I was just wondering how many Irish artists are involved in Liverpool Biennial.
Great question. The Liverpool Biennial has been notoriously difficult to penetrate, primarily because over the last few years, the curatorship hasn't been done from here. They've had international curators who take a theme and curate to that theme, and therefore the nationality of the artist isn't a primary thought for them, although sometimes it is around prestige or about breaking a new talent. So I don't know the answer to that. What I can say is I'm finally, for the first time as the Irish Festival, doing some work with them. So I may, as the months go by, unpick some of that and start saying, well, actually, what about an Irish pavilion at the Liverpool Biennial? And that's what I've got in my head to sort of go forward with ideas for that. So I don't have the answer. I will work on it.
Yeah, I suppose that the point I was thinking about was about, I agree with what Terry said before, and it's sort of strange, isn't it, that there's a level of ignorance about a lot of Irish arts and what Irish artists are doing. I'm involved in Ceramics Ireland, and a lot of ceramicists here say, well, why are you involved in that? Why aren't you in London, sort of thing? And I always say, well, actually, the quality of modern ceramics is higher in Ireland than it is in England. And you go, oh, what is it? And there's an education job there that we need to do to get people onto that agenda, I think.
In the first session of this, we were talking about how we try and get other art mediums to receive the same sort of acceptance as Irish literature does in England. And you're absolutely right about ceramics in Ireland, and we've been working with Design and Crafts Council of Ireland, and actually we've ended up picking 2 ceramicists in a row for exhibits in the Liverpool Festival because it's just been so good. So you are absolutely right. We're trying to figure out ways of doing that, and I think this collective advocacy is part of that, because I don't think we've all joined forces before and really helped ban a way for each other, and the amount of work that we are doing. So we're only hitting smaller pockets, which means we're not getting any sort of national traction. And I think that's what we need to start doing that. And I think there is work to be done around saying, yes, there is this brilliant traditional Irish work, and there is also brilliant contemporary practice being forged here. So I think both aspects of that and the fusion aspects of that need celebrating, and as you say, we need to educate people around that. There's ever such a lot to be done. It's great, it's exciting, it means there's space for us, and we've got to carve out a market. But I think doing that collectively and using the sort of collective power that we have got as a network is the way to start championing those things.
Yeah, that's great.
Do you want to talk a bit about your practice and what you do, Jean?
Well, I tend to be a bit of a jack of all trades because I do writing and ceramics and art. I tend to work on a lot of Irish themes and put exhibitions together and stuff. But particularly the ceramics, I have exhibited with Ceramics Ireland in Dublin. And like I say, I just think the quality of the Irish arts is there, and there's so much going on. that people just don't know about. And I don't know, I think a lot of things are coming together. Brexit's coming together, isn't it? And Brexit has also shown what the level of ignorance that there is between the countries as well, sadly. So, there's a lot of work to do.
I think you're right about it flagging the ignorance. I think that's a good thing, though, long term, because it means we now know what the battle is. Whereas before, we didn't know, and it was sort of hidden behind, the sort of smoke and mirrors of assumptions and that's assuming people knew better. And of course, actually, what we found is a lot of people don't and didn't. So that re-education now can start because we know what we're tackling. So I think that although it's horrible and it's a bit like having to clean the garage out, you've got to take everything out, put it on the driveway, figure out what it is you need, figure out what's good, what's broken, what has to go, and then restack it. And I think that's kind of where we are. That's really useful, though, because now if Birmingham need a ceramicist, there's a direct link. Patrick, would you like to say more about Cultus and what it's doing and who you might like to work with, or particular areas of work you really hope to develop? I've just been obviously listening and picking up from what Terry said and what some things Jean said. I've got 2 questions, if that's all right. Yeah.
One of them specifically for the artists and the practitioners here. As Terry kind of talked about, traditional Irish music is essentially, it's traditional Irish music. People will put that in a box, largely depending on whether they like it or not, but it's quite specifically Irish. I'm looking and listening to other people here, writing, theatre, ceramics, art, sculpture. These aren't as intrinsically Irish. It's not in the title, if you like. So I'm just interested to know from the artist how they might, whether they change their approach, and whether they emphasize or promote the Irishness of either themselves or the work. I like John used the phrase early on at the beginning of, I think he said Irish inspired art, or art from an Irish, and how. So I'm interested to know how individual artists and practitioners actually promote themselves and their work, and where they see that Irishness as being an advantage or a disadvantage, and whether I think, as may be the case, that changes depending on who you're presenting to or what audience you're looking for. So that's one thing I'd be interested to know. And the second one I think is more towards the Irish centres or the places, the festivals, the people who put this stuff out there. Obviously, we're talking here to people who predominantly work to Irish audiences and predominantly put on Irish art for Irish audiences. But again, is there in that some kind of suggestion that Irish arts is better than non-Irish arts? Or has anyone thought about whether we put on non-Irish arts, English-based arts, for example, for Irish audiences? Because there's nothing to say that Irish audiences, Irish people in Britain, we like non-Irish arts as well. We like all sorts of arts. But does that factor into the thinking of the Irish centres? Do they put on, I don't know, North African music because Irish people in their area like North African music? Or is their cultural remit just to put on Irish arts or Irish generated, Irish themed activities? So I don't know if that's helpful. There's 2 questions there. I rambled a bit, but I'll throw that open to people.
I mean, I can answer from an organisational point of view how we've considered our remit, which is no, I don't tend to put on non-Irish linked work for our audiences, but I recognise that our audiences are 80% local, and that within that 80% locality, probably 50% of them have an Irish connection. But that means that we are already showing Irish work to non-Irish people. So our remit, Liverpool Irish Festival, is to celebrate Irish creativity, not as better than other cultural creativity, but as representative of audiences who need representation because actually it's underrepresented in England.
So that's exactly the answer I was expecting, but so that's putting the emphasis on the artistic delivery rather than the audience, if you like, because you're putting the Irish arts first, and you're putting it out to any audience, Irish or otherwise, as opposed to focusing on an Irish audience and providing content for them.
To an extent, yes. There is hope that that is actually a Venn, that you have Irish audiences, non-Irish audiences, but actually there's quite a big crossover in the middle where you approach both. So I think there is an understanding that non-Irish people will this term benefit from that, which is really arrogant. But what I mean is should be able to enjoy and participate as much as somebody who already knows that sort of work and enjoys engaging in it and has participated in it all their life. But you're right, I mean, today I had a text message from Morocco, would you put this on? It's like, well, actually, it's not really in our remit. That's not where our funding comes in for bringing in that kind of work for an Irish audience in Liverpool. So from our point of view, no, we don't really commission non-Irish work to celebrate with an Irish audience specifically as part of our festival.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested to hear from others, and I'm very keen still to hear from artists about whether or not they use their Irishness as a positive or whether they found it to be a barrier. Terry?
Okay, yeah, I can break that down even further, just following on from what Patrick said. When I've been producing plays over the years, especially when it started out first in the 90s, and our audiences were North London audiences, and we used to take them around the country to Irish centres, etc. But I invariably had to look at a play like The Hostage and a John B. Keane play, something tragic comedy, rather than, even though I loved the Brian Friel plays. So back to reading your audiences, if you're going to an Irish centre with predominantly Irish-born audience there who emigrated, you have to know your audience, but we went the route of giving them what they like, frankly. But all our performances were open to everybody. But that's my contribution to that aspect. Anyway.
Anybody else? I'm going to go to Jean and then to Terry.
Well, what Patrick said was such a big question. I don't quite know how to answer it. I don't think I can, but I just thought I'd give the example of some of the work that I did do, because one of the things that I'm involved in is shipbuilding, well, ceramics around shipbuilding, believe it or not. And I also do work to do with women and social justice and history and mythology. But just taking shipbuilding, for example, I did a exhibition in Liverpool around the Cunard and the Three Queens, which was to do about construction, 1930s ships, the classic ships to do with Liverpool, which was fine, that was okay. But then when I was in contact with people in Wexford, and they were doing an exhibition to do with work, and they asked me to take the shipbuilding stuff to Wexford, and I was a bit astonished at first, because I thought, why would anyone in Wexford really want to know anything about Liverpool shipbuilding? Yeah, because in my head it was quite sort of a specialist thing, but actually because it was abstract work around shipbuilding, they loved it, and it was interesting talking to people who had an interest just in ships, with obviously Wexford being a port and a harbour and everything, and all the fishing boats and everything, and the mechanics of ships are the same, aren't they, no matter what ships they are. So that wasn't like to do with Irishness, that was just to do with sort of taking something and bringing it into a different culture, but it was still relevant. I don't know whether I can really explain that properly.
No, I think there is something about not thinking you know it all, that actually somewhere that's landlocked might have lots of interest in water because they don't have access to water in the same way.
Oh, yeah.
I think there is quite often something like that. that we can think about. And Patrick's point about why aren't we programming non-Irish work for Irish audiences is that it's a difficult one to get around, but there might be some real sense in thinking through that. And if it wasn't Irish, what should it be?
Yeah, but by the same token, I mean, the Irish work that I do in Liverpool and in Birkenhead to do with Irish history, say around 1916, stuff like that, and people wouldn't have known about those sorts of things, and the storytelling around that connected and combining it with art, you know, there's a lot of interest there again from people. I suppose I'm coming back to the education thing again a bit now.
Would anybody else like to pick up on any points from Patrick about programming or around Barry? I'll come to you in 2 ticks then, William, about barriers or positivity to using your Irishness. William first.
Sure. Just to answer the programming question, mainly, well, I mean, we program, or in the good old days, we programmed a year-long, centre that was full of everything we could possibly get our hands on in Irish culture. That wasn't to say that we disregarded things that maybe didn't scream Irishness. You know, we took in every submission, every project that we had, and we chatted about it and felt if it was right to the basis of the program. A lot of what we did debate is actually the differences actually in Irish culture, even in just traditional music, who is a purist and who's a new form, and the fact that there's a split in an audience there, that people wouldn't go see. Some people will only go see pure, some people will only go see modern trad, and you know, there's only so many days in the calendar as well to try and get the best of for your audience when you are specifically funded to showcase the best of Irish talent. But we've had events here, you know, that are Caribbean nights with Irish, you know, collaborations and that, because also Hammersmith is a multi-cultural ethnical area where, you know, it was in the 60s and 70s very Irish, and that percentage has dropped. But we do a lot of community work to help the people around that. So I would say when it comes to programming, the Irishness of it is definitely integral to us setting and achieving our goal each year. But I don't think it doesn't cause us to throw projects that don't feel Irish out when they're submitted to us, because we are an arts and culture centre and we want to showcase arts and culture. But 90 to 95% of everything we do here will definitely be pretty Irish on the tin, I would say, in that sense. But you know, we've taken projects here that, you know, maybe off the cuff you wouldn't recognize would be Irish. You know, we've had movie screenings here. We screened 3 billboards of Ebbing, Missouri, and when it came out as well because of the flavor. But that was a movie set in Alabama, or Missouri. It's in the title. Whoops. So you know, there's what culture it is to people, and what it means to be Irish is different things, and we're seeing that as well across the pandemic. You know, people are dipping into more outputs than they've never thought. We've had people write poetry for the first time ever for us that, you know, never would have written poetry before. People who have expressed interest in literature when they were only fans of music before, because they have a lot more free time and they don't seem as focused. So I would say to maybe bring it back to the question, is yes, we still program to have an Irish program, but yes, it's as times change, arts centres have to be aware of the changes happening around them as well, or you do lose touch with your goal and your community.
And I think there's something else in there that you said that was interesting, there's only so many days in the calendar, so that can also limit what you feel you can do to be truly representative, or do all of that other work that's also great but not necessarily specifically in your mission.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, you know, we've got 10 days a year to program, really. That's not enough time as it is. I I'm guessing that other places find that, and it will be different between venue-based organisations and non-venue-based organisations like us.
Mm-hmm.
Would anybody else like to say anything about their artistic practice?
Can I mention, I just wanted to mention a few avenues that we have sort of put here, and we're always looking for collaboration on at the Irish Cultural Centre since the pandemic has began. We've basically been closed to the general public since the 16th of March. We have a fantastic art centre here. It's a new build. It's it's state of the art and everything. But now we're having to make changes in it that we didn't think we'd ever have to do. We're basically building an infrastructure here that it means that hopefully, regardless of what tiers come in, we'll still be able to showcase arts. So we're trying to keep as many artists and work as possible, but it's not really happening at the minute. We have put in place sort of 3 avenues. We sort of do 3 avenues in our normal job. We do culture, community, and education. So on the culture side, we have a digital channel that we launched back in April called ICC Digital. And we've done a couple of specific projects over that. That is a channel based to showcasing the best of Irish art, first generation, second generation, third generation, shadow diaspora, all that sort of feeling that if people want to submit or be considered to be showcased on it, you can write to us and say, oh, can I send you some stuff, and we might ask you to record something for us. Over the summer we did a project with our local Irish second generation, third generation, and upcoming sort of Celtic talent called the ICC Sessions, where we brought them into a COVID secure location and filmed them doing 20-30 minutes. That whole series is online for you to watch as well, free of charge. We've also done a literary festival, which has people like Roddy Doyle, Emma Donoghue, John Banville, all talking about their work. That's all online as well, free to watch and share and spread the word. It's all there, but we're still taking submissions for home concerts. At this minute, no recording in the centre is happening because I think Hammersmith is 1 in 22 people has it as a statistic or something like that. So nobody is coming in to work here until that rises a bit. But we're taking in, it doesn't mean that the culture is stopping. Our education program is all online. We do music classes, we do Irish language classes, we do poetry classes, and we take submissions from academics who might want to propose short courses and teach as well. So we've seen an increase in people joining us on education. And then the last one we've done is we've done a community project called the Culture Hotline, where we've taken students or out of work artists and got them to play an afternoon concert over the phone, which can be dialed in from anywhere across the UK. It's a free phone number, and you can listen and chat with artists who maybe are doing a harp recital or an Irish sing-along. And we'll also have top tips for how to beat lockdowns on it. There's a slight welfare aspect to it as well, but it's to sort of break up that monotony that comes with lockdown, especially in our vulnerable and elders, and give them a place to chat and break that isolation and loneliness as well. So those 3 sort of strands they haven't disappeared from the Irish Culture Centre in Hammersmith, and we're always looking to collaborate as much as we can on any of those 3 strands. So if anybody is interested in working with us or has ideas and moving things forward, always feel free to drop me an email.
Has anybody else got anything that they would like to say about their work, or barriers or positivity about their Irishness? Terry.
Yeah, probably. Oh, hello. Yeah. Taking on Patrick's 2 points and a third point, I'll start with the third. The style of music I play is obviously, if people don't know, I'm playing traditional music, but I've had a lifelong passion since a child. I started my whistle playing off unbelievably by playing along to the TV. The test card was the first whistles I ever played, and I learned for quite a long time before I ever got involved in traditional music, because I didn't know what it was. My dad didn't take me till I was 12 to the Irish Centre, but I was playing whistle for about 3 years. I only ever played along with the test card. So sorry, the young ones test card when the telly used to finish overnight, and used to just put music on in the background. So I'd be listening to late at night, because my dad would be out playing music till 1 in the morning. My mum would be in bed, and I'd be sitting at the telly playing along, and I'd be playing every type of music imaginable, really, classical and you know, pop and just all whatever was on, really. And the reason for saying that is it's given me a lifelong interest in other music, and it deepened into world music, really, in the end. And I've been very fortunate. I've traveled all over the world, and I've played with lots of great artists from other cultures, particularly African, Chinese, Japanese, and even through some of the Baltics. And so there's been a development in understanding of quite a few musicians festivals and online as to where Irish music sits in world music. And I think it sits very, very well and equally with all other types of world music. It isn't seen as a poor relation. For many, it's seen as like the pinnacle of where to get to, particularly in musicianship and quality of group work that's been done, which isn't a sort of very cultural, as Rory said, sorry, not Rory, as Will said, the factions can be totally trad people, and I know loads of those, and who will go to trad concerts and go to trad sessions and listen to trad music and come to listen to me and follow me, but if I get involved in anything else, it just doesn't pique their interest. Well, I have almost a larger number of people that I know have come across who would dip into and would support a massive range. You know, by massive range, I mean an experimental range, even, of other ways of bringing our Irish culture music and maybe other arts in with other art forms, possibly from other places around the world. So I'm thinking of the likes of, you know, certainly the Hammersmith, and that I would have expected, you know, the likes of Jiggy or Afro-Celt Sound System, you know, there'd be traddies who would go to that type of concert, but some that wouldn't because it's too jazzy. Whereas, you know, it's a fantastic culture. You got Salsa Celtica with, you know, Amy Coyne banjo up in Edinburgh. You know, a great fusion of salsa and Irish and Scottish. So it has been done. It does work. And actually, some of the biggest bands on the big festivals have that sort of approach. It isn't we are just this nation and we do that. And for a lot of them, it includes a very Celtic element. Rather than just, I won't say Irish all the time, but certainly, you know, Breton music is massive across the continent, as well as Irish, probably as equal as Irish now. And then some of the more traditional French music as well. So with that in mind, the only reason I'm saying is that there are audiences for the organisations who will only put on Irish content for their Irish audience. That will never change until, unfortunately, we have to lose some money on some gigs. And I know, you know, our friend Simon Glenn used to do it at the Philharmonic. He put status quo on 1 week to fill every seat, and the organisation would make some money, so he could put an African band on the following week and lose a shirt. You know, so that would allow audiences which would build over time. It's a long-term drip process. And you just, you know, as Patrick was asking, you know, you've got to bite the bullet and be brave. And I know finance literally is everything for some people. Their organisation relies on the people to turn up, bar takings, food, ticket money, that type of thing. But, you know, if there was a bi-monthly programme which says, try this, you know, it's a big gamble whether we can get, you know, some other outside funding for it. What I don't know, but we're not going to break this mold until there's some brave people out there to make those steps. Because it still sometimes feels like it hasn't moved for me since I was a child. In lots of ways it has, but in lots of ways it hasn't. So, you know, it's been a slow crawl rather than a nice leap. So I've tried to encapsulate Patrick's two questions there, but also from my own experience, there is audience. Certainly if I go to, you know, literally an African night, Tiamani Debate on Cora at the Irish at the Philharmonic a few years ago. You know, a quarter of that audience were from the Irish Festival, because they've been told about it. Come and hear this guy. He's about the best of another traditional instrument on the planet, and he'll blow your socks off. And they bought the albums, and they've gone to see Chet Lowe's, another great kora player. They'll be now listening to Seito Keiko, as you know, with Catherine Finch. So, you know, these audiences have been built by other people, and but it has to be done. It has to be put on. So, yeah, I suppose that's a summary of what's exploding in my brain at the moment.
Thank you.
Can I come in on that? Sorry, I'm absolutely excited by those ideas, Terry. I think going back to Patrick's question is, you know, Irish music for an Irish audience. I think the core of that question is, who are Irish people now? You know, we're working with Arabic Irish people, both who've come over to Ireland as asylum seekers and come here. Students who were born second gen Arabic communities in Ireland. You know, we're working with Black people who were born in Ireland and have come here as students or come here to work. So the question of who is Irish, I think, is changing. The traditional kind of, you know, 60 plus that fill a group, you know, fill a place on a Saturday night, a hall, you know, at an Irish centre. There's a little stalwart core group there, but those people are becoming more and more frail. They're becoming less likely to go out in the dark. We know, because we have to put a lot of our events on in the afternoon to get people and capture people coming out. So I think we need to shift. As you said, I mean, I wanted to hug you, Terry, when you said it hasn't changed. I mean, I was a kid going to the Irish Centre. I was a kid doing my Irish dancing in Rock Ferry, you know, Maureen Bolger. And it was like, oh, you still got the finger marks on the back of your arm, Terry. I do ask everybody that. Yeah. So what we've got is we have, and I think sometimes because we're from the community, our own perceptions of who the Irish community are confined and controlled by our expectations. And I think you're right, we need to step outside of that, both as providers of you know, arts and opportunities. We need to think bigger than that. We need to kind of go out there and do a bit of scoping, really, and find out what is the interest. If we put on, I know we did and I think, you know, again, coming back to the Irish Festival's position as a facilitator and a kind of, what's the word, not an agitator, but it is almost that kind of, you know, stirring things up a little bit, is we did we worked through the Irish Centre with Irish kids. We had our Irish Travellers and the Liverpool Arabic Centre Arabic kids, the Yemeni kids, all come together. Oh my word, I'd love some money to do some more of that stuff again. The energy, the power, and it was the music and the food that brought them together, and the synergy, particularly between the Traveller and the Yemeni kids, because the cultures, and that's still only the one positive conversation I've ever had about Big Fat Gypsy Wedding, where a Yemeni service group turned around and went, oh my God, we finally found another community just like us. They were absolutely made up. And I think that's what we need to go for, that synergy, that kind of dynamism, that energy that comes when you bring the unexpected together and actually realise, you know, you only have to look at the music and the annotation and the notation in Arabic music. You know, look at the pipes and the instruments that are played in Turkish and Arabic music. There is such a similarity already, and I think bringing that together and bringing people who are doing that work together and exploring that in a space that challenges everybody, actually, not just Irish people around what is Irishness, but what is, you know, who are our neighbours, who are our partners, who actually lives in this city with us that we don't talk to because we only stay in our little, you know, Irish social groups, or, you know, we don't get out apart from when we've got these opportunities. I think you're right, Terry. I think, you know, I go to Brittany a lot, and we're what, 30 kilometres from the nearest big centre. We live in my partner's family's house is in a little hamlet that's got houses, and there's a village of about 25 houses, which is, you know, the average size in that area, about 2 kilometers away. The nearest pub has a monthly Celtic night, and what they do is they bring musicians together from all over the Celtic diaspora, and we are talking Welsh musicians, Irish musicians. I've heard oh gosh, the north of Spain, the Celtic culture, the
Galician.
Thank you, that's the one. Yes, with the really fantastic language. That, you know, there's so many different musician kind of groups, and they come to this tiny little pub in the middle of nowhere once a month, because that's what is generated, that expectation that we are all one, we can blend together because we've got this connection in you know, in common.
Is it Le Touquelaire, the place?
No, where I live, it's not far from Guingamp, actually, which is the only football team in the French Premier League from Brittany. So it's Guingamp is the place. It's not far from the north. It's more the north.
So it is related. There's a place called La Touquelaire, which is Yvette Ballard. Now, she plays Irish fiddle. You know, she brings over Irish artists, plus many other you know, nationalities artists as well, from Scandinavia and across the European countries. But you know, many Irish artists. She goes to the Ennistrad Festival every single year for donkey's years. You know, this happens in many other places. There's a massive respect for it, but unfortunately, it doesn't seem to get the same respect here at home, where we are now.
Okay. I'm going to need to start drawing things together, because this was booked in just for an hour and a half, I'm afraid. I would like to flag up that we have an artist commission open at the moment. It ends probably at the end of January. We may extend, but if there are any artists here who'd like to take a look at that Gail Lynn commission, I've dropped the link into the chat here. We'd love to hear from you. My understanding is that there is a need for this network. We do want to work together. We would like to drop our artistic details in together and continue to speak. Is quarterly enough, or do we need it to be bi-monthly? At the moment, I've got it penciled into my calendar as quarterly. What are the thoughts?
God, I wouldn't have thought quarterly would be enough time if it's a new group, monthly or bi-monthly, yeah.
So I'm mindful of my capacity to run it monthly. I can go to bi-monthly, which would make our next meeting the 16th of March. So that's just before global greening for most of us. Or we could do the 23rd, assuming that weekday professional hours is the best time for us to meet. That's when I would prefer to meet, because this is very much part of a working world and working collaborations. But is that okay for everybody else? Do we think that's the best time to get the best people? Good. Okay, so shall we say March the 23rd then, and I will issue some other dates working on a bi-monthly pattern from then on?
Emma,
sorry.
No, sorry, just Emma, while you're writing that down, just to give you a heads up that our good friend there in Manchester, Rose Morris, I've done hi Rose, done a feature for Rose for the Irish Post, which should be out maybe this week or next week. I did a profile of her 40 plus years working in culture and welfare in Manchester. And if there's any other people you know, including yourselves, who might like a profile in the Post, just get in touch with me. And in the fullness of time, I'll get something in about this group.
That's marvellous. Thank you ever so much, Jerry. if any of the artists that have met with us today have ideas started by conversation here and would like to follow up on those, we don't have to wait for the bi-month, well, actually, not even just the artists, but the cultural organisations too. If we want to follow up on that, please do drop me an email. I can link you up if you're not, or if you don't already know one another. I'm very happy to do that. This is a free and open group. For GDPR reasons, we all have to sign up that we're sort of happy to share those details. So hopefully, I think you have all signed up for that anyway. If that's all, unless anybody else has got anything pressing, I'm going to draw this meeting to a close now. The recording for it will be up hopefully in about 48 hours, if not before, and I will be in touch with you all very soon by email to say thank you and to follow up with the notes and my next steps that have come out of this, which include things that have come out of the white paper and the toolkits that are discussed in here, and starting work on those. I would really like everyone to send me a couple of lines and a couple of links about your organisation and your work, and I'd like to do a what's it called? A cultural connectedness exchange page on our site so people can find you, so we can start talking about you, your work, and creating our network. So we've just got a fast sort of cheat sheet where we can go and link up to each other. Are you all happy to do that?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Are there any other pressing points?
Can I just say, remember to tick the ethnicity box on your census on the 21st, please.
Very good point, well made, Wynne. Rory, you and I will follow up separately. I am meeting the cultural lead for the Department of Foreign Affairs, changed their name, Department of Foreign Affairs, tomorrow. So we'll be able to feed back to the bi-monthly group at the next meeting, how that's gone, where that's going, and how this network can benefit from their position. So, with all that done, thank you ever so much for being involved. Terry, I know I'm seeing you a little bit down the week as well. So it's been lovely to see all of your faces. Nice to meet some new faces, and I'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.